Hi guys, this is a lecture on surgical approaches to hip joint. This is for exam going DNB residents and useful for postgraduate residents, MS residents also. So I am Dr. Lokesh and there is Dr. Sheenam is also there. So we can start the lecture. I can go for this. Okay. So to start the lecture on surgical approach, we must know some bony landmarks. Yes, I think everyone know. We must know the anterior superior iliac spine. You must know the anterior inferior iliac spine and what are the muscle attachments. And you should know the posterior superior iliac spine also in case of doing posterior approach. Then this is pubic symphysis. I think these basic ideas everyone should know. Going to the acetabular labrum, you can see this is the acetabular labrum and this is the fat pad, acetabular fat pad. You can see the ligament of the femoral head or ligamentum teres. So you see here there is a ligament called transverse acetabular ligament. It is very important in doing total hip arthroplasty for a cup inclination. This is the importance of TAL. First, then going to the muscles, we have seen the bony landmarks and we have seen the importance of TAL. Definitely this orientation should be there, and when you are doing THR or you are assisting THR, you should know that TAL is very important. Going to the muscles. So this is from the anterior view. This is from the posterior view. Just to get an idea, everything we can recapitulate within few minutes. So from anterior iliopsoas, you already know this is a flexor, tensor fasciae lata, sartorius. These two muscles are important in anterior approach. You can see adductors, this which is on the medial side. And you can see lateral iliotibial tract and vastus lateralis muscle. So these are the important muscles in the anterior, lateral, medial, and these are the posterior compartment muscles. You can see gluteus maximus, bulkiest muscle here. From the lateral side, this is for just a surgical orientation. You can see that this is for supine position anterior approach. This is actually a posterior thing. We will place in a lateral position for posterior approach. We will see in a forthcoming slides. This is from the lateral view, so that you can see that whatever you can do even lateral in a lateral approach, and you can also do lateral approach in a supine position. And posterior approach should be always done in a lateral position. See that this is the maximus and this is TFL, sartorius, rectus muscles. These are the basic views and orientation you must know before doing any hip surgery. Already we have seen these are the posterior compartment area. So going to the surgical approach, yes, we have anterior approach, anterolateral approach, true lateral approach, posterolateral approach, posterior approach, and medial approach. We have a lot things to do with surgical approaches of hip joint. That the most important thing in exam they are asking is, anyway, everyone know that posterior approach is a very important approach. So from anterior, you have anterior iliofemoral approach is known as Smith-Peterson approach. Actually, there is a mistake, Peterson, SCM, okay? I think there is some mistake. Okay, anterior approach to hip using transverse incision, that is Somerville approach. And there is another known as modified anterolateral iliofemoral approach. The thing here you must know is Smith-Peterson approach, anterior approach to hip joint. Smith-Peterson has two limbs, vertical limb and horizontal limb incision. I will show in the forthcoming slide. Any approach, you should know the position of the patient, line of incision, internervous plane, muscle splitting, and these are all the things. What are the endangering nerves, vessels? These are all the protocol we should follow. What are the indications? What are the advantages and disadvantages? So when I'm teaching Smith-Peterson approach, you can see that position of the patient is supine. I already told that to an anterior approach, you will place a patient in a supine position. If this approach is used for pelvic osteotomies, then place a small sandbag under the affected buttock to push the affected hemipelvis forward. You can see this picture. If this is the affected side, you can place a bump over the same side. Okay. So incision, make a long incision following anterior half of the iliac crest to the anterior superior iliac spine. That is the horizontal limb of Smith-Petersen. From there, you can curve down, so it vertically runs for some 8 to 10 centimeters, heading towards the lateral side of the patella. That is the vertical limb of Smith-Petersen. There are many people fond of asking in your practicals, what is the importance of, if you do Smith-Petersen approach for reducing the neck of femur fracture, there are something you can reduce the neck of femur fracture from the anterior side with the small incision, and you can fix that fracture from the lateral side using DHS or CC screws. So, sir, there I will use only vertical limb of Smith-Petersen. There is an important, so you can see that this is the incision. Here there is a curve. This is the horizontal limb of the Smith-Petersen. This is the vertical limb of the Smith-Petersen. So after incision, you have already seen that the curve is towards the iliac crest, towards the anterior side, and it should face towards the lateral side of the patella. So going to the internervous plane, you will have superficial and deep plane. So the superficial plane lies between sartorius and tensor fasciae lata. We all know that sartorius is supplied by femoral nerve and TFL is supplied by superior gluteal nerve. So whenever you should run between the two muscles which is supplied by a different nerves, then it is called as internervous plane. Okay. Then there arises the question where there is no internervous plane. Yes, we will see in the further slides and approaches. So then going to the underlying superficial dissection, you can see this is the sartorius, this is the tensor fasciae lata. So, okay, this is the sartorius and this is the tensor fasciae lata. For your orientation, this is the lateral side. You can see tensor fasciae lata will be on lateral side. This is somewhat anterior to medial. So the deep plane, we have already seen that superficial plane is between sartorius and TFL. The deep plane is between rectus femoris and gluteus medius. We all know this rectus femoris is a two-head. Okay. Rectus femoris is supplied by a femoral nerve and gluteus medius is supplied by a superior gluteal nerve. This is the another internervous plane. So you can see, you all know now, this is the, yes, this is the sartorius. This is the lateral side. Yeah, tensor fasciae lata. Then in between, you can see the underlying gluteus medius and this is rectus femoris. This is also an internervous plane. This is the deep plane, superficial to deep. Going to the surgical dissection, nothing else is needed. You can see the thing which is highlighted in red. Identify the gap between tensor fasciae lata and sartorius. That is between the lateral and the anteromedial part of the muscles by doing a palpation. Yeah, I will show how to palpate that underlying when you are doing a surgery. Yes. With scissors, you can do a blunt dissection. In this area, you must know that lateral femoral cutaneous nerve of thigh, which passes the deep fascia of thigh, which is close to this intramuscular interval. So this is the endangering structure. You need to preserve this lateral femoral cutaneous nerve. Okay. Then you can retract, after this, you can retract the sartorius upward and medially. Already we have thought that anteromedial, that is, it is going from anterior to medial side. So it is retracted upward and medially, tensor fasciae lata retracted downward and laterally. So you can see that, I can minimize this. You can see that this is by a finger palpation. After doing subcutaneous dissection, you can feel with your finger the interval between the sartorius and tensor fasciae lata. The fascia over the tensor fasciae lata, you can feel a rolling gap between these muscles. Okay, you can see that lateral femoral cutaneous nerve, that is lateral, this is one is the lateral cutaneous femoris nerve, passes the deep fascia very close to the intramuscular interval, okay, between the TFL and sartorius. So here, whatever first endangering structure is, yes, lateral femoral cutaneous nerve. Okay. So this is the blunt dissection. You can see that retract the sartorius upward and medially and tensor fascia downward and laterally. You can see in further picture, I will show that. Okay, after retracting tensor fascia lata and sartorius, you will see two deep layer muscles. Yes, deep layer is between rectus femoris and gluteus medius. So detach the rectus femoris from both of its origin. Okay, one is from, yes, these both origins you should release, or you can retract. Usually you can detach also for extensive approach. Then you will retract it medially. Retract the gluteus medius laterally. Then you can see the capsule of anterior capsule of the hip joint. Inframedially, you will see the iliopsoas. Yes, you can palpate the lesser trochanter where iliopsoas will get attached. Okay. So this is regarding how to keep a capsule tense, adduct and fully externally rotate the leg to put the capsule on stretch. Then same thing, T-shaped capsular incision. Because this is an anterior approach, you will dislocate the hip by doing external rotation after capsulotomy. So you can see the dissection between the sartorius and fascia lata. So this is the deep dissection. You can see here, this is the rectus femoris. Okay. This is the gluteus medius. So here the risk is you will see the ascending branch of lateral femoral circumflex artery that should be ligated. Otherwise, it will bleed. Okay, this is an important thing you should note. So we have already seen a one endangering nerve, lateral femoral cutaneous nerve. Now we are seeing a lateral femoral circumflex artery. So these two structures are at risk. Yes, you can see here they are detaching the rectus femoris. This is the area you can see. They are detaching the rectus femoris from its both origin. Okay, one is from anterior inferior iliac spine, another one is from superior lip of the acetabulum. Then now the capsule is exposed. You can beautifully see this. This is the anterior joint capsule. Yes, next thing is capsule opening. How you open? You will give a T-shaped incision. This is the anterior joint capsule open. Okay, so that you can see the femoral neck. Whatever we do without opening this, some people do the reduction of intracapsular neck of femur in case of shear fractures, which is not amenable to fix by lateral approach. They will approach with the vertical incision of the Smith-Petersen, and they will, with the help of the underlying dissection, blunt dissection, they will go to near the capsule. They won't open the capsule. They will use the levers to reduce the fracture, and they will put a K-wire from the lateral side, from the lateral approach, so that reduction is maintained. Then the fixation is towards they are doing from the lateral side. Okay, without opening the capsule. That was the advantage. That was the advantage of reduction of anterior, reduction from anterior, fixation from lateral. Here, no capsule is open. If you want to do an extensive open reduction, you can go from anterior approach. Okay, capsule is open. If you want further, you can open. Anterior limb can be extended towards the shaft of the humerus by retracting the vastus lateralis laterally. We already discussed dangers, nerves, lateral cutaneous nerve of thigh, and femoral nerve. Yes, already know we have vessels, ascending branch of lateral circumflex femoral. So indications: open reduction for congenital dislocation of hip. Yes, femoral head lies anterosuperior to the true acetabulum. You can go for synovial biopsy. You can do intra-articular fusions, total hip replacement, hemiarthroplasty. They will ask the question, which approach is best? Yes, it is anterior approach. Why? Posterior approaches, your posterior capsule is more weaker than the anterior capsule. So posterior approach, patients are more prone for dislocation. So then for excision of tumor, especially in the pelvic tumors. Okay, these are all the indications. Pelvic osteotomy is arthrotomy. Yes, in case of septic arthritis of hip, you can do an anterior approach for arthrotomy. Anterior column fracture fixation, that is an extended iliofemoral approach. Insert a pin or a nail in the fracture of neck. Yes, that is used for reduction also. Advantages: there is an excellent axis, good muscle function. Yes, you can stay. There are both internervous plane. You can stay within that internervous plane. It can be extended distally, as I already told that. May be extended proximal and medially to expose the entire acetabulum. Yes, the biggest advantage is you will get a source of bone graft because you are already exposing the horizontal limb. It will crosses the iliac crest. You can take a bone graft. Okay. Relaxation of gluteal muscle in case of high riding dislocations. So you can write 5 advantages. What are the disadvantages? Yes, you need a necessity for prolonged protection to avoid the risk for detachment of TFL and gluteus medius. Gluteus medius is the abductor. Okay. High incidence of heterotrophic bone formation? Yes. And joint stiffness. This was the question asked. Which approach will have more? You will have more heterotrophic bone formation. Anterior approach or anterolateral approach. Okay, comparing to posterior approach. And injury to the lateral femoral cutaneous nerve of thigh. You all know that, yes, it will cause dysesthesia or paresthesia in the thigh region, lateral aspect. Exposure to femoral medullary canal is limited. Yes, these are the disadvantages. So we have seen, so what is the position? Then you have seen the soft superficial dissection, deep dissection of internervous plane. You have seen the uses. What are the indications? That is uses, advantages, disadvantages. What are the structures are endangering? Nerve vessels, nerves and vessels. These are the important of anterior approach to the hip joint. Okay. So going to the anterior approach using a transverse incision. This is known as Somerville approach. Yes, there is a question asked in a DNB. What is Somerville approach? And I asked regarding Bickney incision. This is a transverse Bickney incision, which is used for irreducible congenital dislocation of the hip joint. It has sufficient exposure to ilium and acetabulum. You can see here, make a straight skin incision beginning from the anteroinferior and medial to the anterior superior iliac spine. You can see here, and course obliquely and superiorly posterior towards the middle third of the iliac crest. Okay, you can see this is cosmetically better incision. Okay, you can deepen the incision to expose the crest also. So underlying, you can see that there you can incise the capsule in this fashion. So capsulotomy is done, and use of ligamentum teres. You can trace the true acetabulum because you are not damaging the ligamentum teres. Opening the capsule, this is the head of the femur. You can trace the ligamentum teres and you can see the true acetabulum. So these radial incisions in the acetabular labrum, and you can remove all the tissues from the depth of the true acetabulum. Capsulorrhaphy is done after excision of the redundant capsule. Okay, capsulorrhaphy is reconstruction. Again, they are suturing. You can see here, this radial incision is sutured. So this completes the anterior approach. The another question asked in surgical approach of hip joint is anterolateral approach to the hip. Okay, we can see this. Yes, this is known as Watson and Jones approach. This is most commonly used for total hip replacement. It combines an excellent exposure to acetabulum with safety during reaming of the femoral shaft. Here, I mentioned uses: total hip arthroplasty, hemiarthroplasty, used for open reduction and internal fixation of femoral neck fracture, synovial biopsy, biopsy of the femoral neck. Most of the times, there are three common uses you can see. One is for hip replacement, hemiarthroplasty, reduction of femoral neck fractures, and biopsy. This is common for anterior and anterolateral approach. Okay. So position, I already told that for anterolateral approach, you can place the patient in the supine position. This is the position of the patient. There is a catch. You can bring the graded trochanter, you see, to the edge of the table, allow the buttock skin and fat to fall posteriorly to away from the operative plane. Okay, this is to bring the graded trochanter at the edge of the table to make a prominent thing. This is the incision. You can see this is the anterosuperior iliac spine. This is the lateral. Somewhat the incision is anterior. There is somewhat most posterior incision also. This is anterolateral approach. Okay, this is regarding here you will have a vastus ridge, then vastus lateralis muscle will start. So flex leg about 30 degree and adduct. You can see flexor leg and adduct. You will trace from the shaft of the femur. You will feel the tip of the graded trochanter. Okay, this is to palpate the bony landmark, and you make the mark the graded trochanter. So then you can make an 8 to 15 centimeter of incision, whatever incision is required for your fixation, centering over the tip of the graded trochanter. The incision should cross the posterior third of the trochanter, okay, before running down to the shaft of the femur. In this approach, there is no true internervous plane. In anterior approach, we have true internervous plane. In this, there is no true internervous plane because the approach is between the internervous plane. Whatever the approach we are doing is between the gluteus medius and tensor fascia lata. Both are supplied by common nerve supply. These two muscle cells, we all know that superior gluteal nerve. These are the abductors. Okay. You can see here, after skin incision, subcutaneous fat, you will see the fascia lata, which is covering the fascia covering the tensor fascia lata. You see, this is the vastus lateralis muscle, and here they are cutting the fascia lata posterior to the tensor fascia lata. Then after reflecting that, you can see here, these are the superior gluteal vessels. Okay, so this is vastus lateralis, this is vastus ridge. You will see this is the gluteus medius, and this is the tensor fascia lata. Okay, so tensor fascia lata is reflected anteriorly. Okay, this is the important thing. You will see the superior gluteal vessels attaching here. Okay, series of vessels that cross an interval between TFL and gluteus medius. Then you see here, this is the gluteus medius abductor, which is retracted posteriorly. You see, this is the tensor fascia lata, which is retracted anteriorly, uncovering the fatty layer directly over the joint capsule. Okay, this is the beauty of Watson and Jones approach. Then bluntly dissect the fat pad. You will see the anterior portion of the joint capsule to expose it and the rectus femoris tendon. So here they have detached the vastus lateralis. You see, this is the joint capsule, and see that this is the tendon of the rectus femoris. Okay, this one. Then there is another thing. You can go for osteotomy of the greater trochanter to get a better approach. This is the level they are doing. Again, we can fix it with screws. You see here, to better visualization, you can reflect the osteotomized portion of trochanter superiorly and to reveal the joint capsule. Here, we are not at all disturbing the abductors. We are not dissecting gluteus medius, just osteotomizing, and you can refix with screws. Okay. This is the joint capsule. You can see this is the rectus femoris tendon. Yes. The joint capsule may also be exposed by partial resection of gluteus medius tendon from the anterior portion of the trochanter. But better, there are two things here. Some people say you can go for a partial resection and see the anterior portion of you can see the capsule. Another people say that you can go through the GT, greater trochanter osteotomy, then you can reach the anterior capsule. The proponents for thinking that which is better is someone who is favoring this kind of gluteus medius partial resection and exposure. They think that GT osteotomy will be more prone for non-union. The people using GT osteotomy, they think that there will be an abductor weakness and lurch while you are going to dissect gluteus medius. The power is definitely going to decrease. But what we are thinking is there is only a partial resection. So these are the both things is happening. So then reflect the head of the rectus femoris from the anterior portion of the joint capsule. You can beautifully see that there is a reflected head of rectus femoris. This is the anterior hip joint capsule. Okay. So this is regarding the exposure of the joint capsule. So after exposure, you can put a 3 Homans and you can see expose the entire acetabulum. Okay. Even to dislocate and resect the femoral head, placing a 3 or 4 Homans around the lip of the acetabulum. This is providing the 360-degree view of the acetabulum. Yes, you can see this is the transverse acetabular ligament from lateral side from this position. Okay. How to enlarge this approach? Local measures like incising fascia latae anteriorly or posteriorly. Extensile measures. Yes, we already discussed. From lateral position, from lateral incision, you can dissect or extend lateral downwards to gain for shaft of femur axis. The muscle which comes in line is vastus lateralis. This approach cannot be extended proximally. This is the disadvantage. Yes, we have already seen this is regarding the GT osteotomy and opening the capsule. So this finished the anterolateral approach. These are the two questions asked in DNP. One is regarding bikini incision or Somerville approach, that is anterior approach. Second is regarding the anterolateral approch, Watson and Jones. This is the true lateral approach for hip preserving gluteus medius. Nothing here. There is no dissection of gluteus medius. This is the preservative approach. You can see the incision. So it is between the gluteal fascia and IT band, iliotibial, which is dissected mid-lateral line. This is just for a brush up. This is not at all asked. Incision is made to the bone obliquely across the trochanter and distal to the vastus lateralis. So this is vastus lateralis. This is an obliquely across the trochanter. Okay. So tendon of gluteus minimus is split and divided before retraction proximally. You can see that this is minimus. There is a retraction of medius. They are dissecting from the splitting from the minimus area. Okay. Because the major abductor is medius. Okay. Capsule has been opened to expose the joint. Posterolateral approach. Okay, I am going to the posterior approach. We have two things, posterior approach and posterolateral approach. Posterior approach is Sutherland-Moore, posterolateral approach is Gibson approach. We will see what is the difference. Place the position in the lateral position. Already I told that posterior approach is done in lateral position. Okay, begin the proximal limb of the incision at a point 6 to 8 centimeter anterior to the posterior superior iliac spine and just distal to the iliac crest. If you remember this bony landmark, I will show the what is the difference between Sutherland-Moore. Okay, overlying anterior border of the gluteus maximus. This is anterior border of the gluteus maximus muscle. Okay, extend it distally over the anterior edge of the greater trochanter. See the difference? Anterior edge of the gluteus maximus, anterior edge of the greater trochanter. Then is a always it is along the shaft of the femur, coming as a lateral incision. Okay, that is so-called posterolateral approach of Gibson. Okay, this is the incision. You can see it is coming anteriorly. Okay, this is coming anteriorly. A curvilinear incision coming anteriorly. Okay, and then it is going towards the shaft. So then underlying soft tissue dissection is done. Anterior and posterior muscle mass have been retracted. You all know that from now. This posteriorly we have gluteus maximus, anteriorly, laterally you have lateralis, anteriorly you have fascia, and you can expose the greater trochanter. Okay, this is gluteus medius, abductor, which is attaching to the greater trochanter. Okay, so then you will see that medius and minimus have been divided near their insertions. Yes, this is the division. Okay. And retracted. You can see the capsule, the way of their incising the capsule. Okay, then dislocated by doing flexion, abduction, and external rotating the thigh. So there is a modification. This is regarding direct lateral approach. We have seen posterolateral approach. Just for an completion sake of lateral approach, I will say Harding's modification. These are the things they are doing nowadays. Harding modification. So here also same place a patient in a supine position with a greater trochanter at the edge of the table to make the greater trochanter prominent. It is better to make an incision, and for underlying dissection, incision is over the posteriorly directed lazy J incision, which is centered over the greater trochanter. The only difference is instead of osteotomizing the greater trochanter, instead incising the tendon of gluteus medius obliquely across the trochanter, leaving the posterior half attached to the trochanter. Here they won't do osteotomies. Okay, the only difference. Carry the incision proximally in line with gluteus medius. Distally, you can carry with the fibers of vastus lateralis. Here you can see that Harding's direct approach. This is a curved incision. Underlying soft tissue dissection done. This is the tensor fasciae lata. You will see this is the orientation you need to have. This is the lateral side. Okay, vastus lateralis. This is towards the shaft. This is towards the greater trochanter. You can see this gluteus medius muscles. Okay, this is the lazy J lateral incision. This is like a J. Okay. Tensor fascia lata is retracted anteriorly. You all know gluteus maximus is retracted posteriorly. Incision is through the gluteus medius, which is outlined. Here they are doing not osteotomy. Posterior half is left attached to the graded trochanter. Anterior joint capsule is open. This is regarding the hard DIMS approach. Graded trochanter and bulk of the gluteus medius preserved. Okay. You can see this is the modified direct lateral transgluteal approach, just for an overview. You can see this is regarding abductor split, which is determined by location of the femoral neck. Okay. Here they will palpate and then they will split. Okay. This is gluteus medius. They will palpate and underlying, they will use the finger to know the level and they will split. Going to the last thing, posterior approach to the hip joint. You all know that the name is southern approach or southernmost approach. You will have two things. One is Osborn, another one is southernmost approach. Okay. Going to the Osborn approach, you see the incision. I will come back. You need to begin the incision 4.5 centimeter distal and lateral to the posterior superior iliac spine. In that Gibson, that is anterior. Okay. Posterior superior, lateral to the posterior superior iliac spine. Continue it laterally and distally. Remain parallel with the fibers of gluteus maximal muscle. Okay. To the posterior superior angle of greater trochanter. Distally along the posterior border of the greater trochanter. Their anterior border. Here posterior border. Yes. Separate the fibers of gluteus maximus. We should be inline parallel. Okay. It should not be divided more than 7 centimeter. As everyone knows, gluteus maximus is supplied by the inferior gluteal artery and the nerve. So while splitting, you need to stop at the level of 5 centimeter, but you can go up to 7 centimeter, not more than 7 centimeter. It will affect the inferior gluteal artery and the nerve. This is an important point in examination. Definitely they are going to ask in orals. You can see this incision. This is the line of incision. And you can see that underlying soft tissue dissection is done. So these are the things they will ask. Gluteus maximus is split and you will see the underlying structures while going to the short external rotators. This is what is they will ask, what is the relation between the short external rotators and the sciatic nerve. In this diagram, it was beautifully explained. You will see this is the piriformis tendon and the muscle. The sciatic nerve is under the piriformis muscle from the greater is from the sciatic nerves while leaving the sciatic nerves, and you will see that the sciatic nerve is under the piriformis muscle over the gemelli and obturator externus. Okay, so you must know the arrangement. First thing is piriformis, then is superior gemelli, then is obturator internus, then is inferior gemelli, then you will have a quadratus femoris muscle. The difference is while you are doing hip preserving surgeries, you can dissect these all muscles. You can dissect all short external rotators in hip preserving like femoral head fracture fixation. But you shouldn't divide quadratus femoris because it has a big important blood supply. Okay, so this is a branch of medial circumflex femoral artery. Definitely, if you're going to cut this in a hip preserving surgeries, the head will get AVN or avascular changes is inevitable. So the difference between doing hemiarthroplasty and the head preserving surgeries is in hemiarthroplasty, you can also divide quadratus femoris muscle. There is no issue because you are going to take out the head. Okay. Then after lifting all the short external rotators, it will happily protect the sciatic nerve. You will see this. This is the joint capsule, posterior joint capsule. Okay. So that you can open in the way of invert T incision. I will show in the Morse approach. Same thing, you can extend this by dividing the insertion of gluteus maximus in the fascia lata 5 centimeter. Okay, rotate the thigh internally, detach the tendon. Same things. This gemelli will protect the sciatic nerve. The capsule is now viewed and incised longitudinally. Okay, further exposure is obtained by retracting the gluteus medial above, which is above proximally, and quadratus femoris muscle distally. See, they are mentioning the word retracting. Gluteus medius is an important abductor. Quadratus femoris, I already told that it has an important blood supply which is from the medial circumflex femoral artery. You need to retract it, not to dissect. Okay. in a hip preserving surgery. So going to the southernmost approach, this is a Paka posterior approach, what everyone is interested in asking. This is the southernmost approach, which is also known as southern approach because of South California. They have did a lot of surgeries during that time. Indications are hemiarthroplasty, total hip replacement, posterior acetabular fracture fixation. Yeah, dependent drainage of hip sepsis. Anyone asked hip septic arthritis, which approach? Anterior approach. This is a dependent drainage of hip sepsis. Removal of loose body, pedicle bone grafting, open reduction of posterior hip dislocation. What we have talked this regarding this hip preservation surgeries. You can't dissect everything what you see. Though this is the position of the patient, they will ask, you need to pad all bony prominences. This is the lateral position. You need to keep the affected limb up, and this is the position. You can see this is the extended limb. You need to even pad the malleoli, greater trochanter, everything, and sometimes you need to pad the lateral condyles also. Incision. This is asked, start 10 centimeter distal to the posterior superior iliac spine or 3 finger breadth. 3 finger breadth from the posterior superior iliac spine, extend distally over the posterior lateral. Yeah, you all know that laterally, extended distally or laterally parallel to the fibers of gluteus maximus and to the posterior margin of the greater trochanter. Then directly incision is towards the shaft, femoral shaft, lateral. Okay. This is regarding the incision. 3 finger breadth or 10 centimeter from posterior superior iliac spine towards the fibers of the gluteus maximus, posterior border of the greater trochanter, then towards the shaft. This is the incision. This is the curved incision. Always southernmost is a curved incision. Okay, skin incision for posterior approach. Then underlying subcutaneous fat, and you can see the fascia. Actually, inside the fascia lata, this is from here. It is fascia lata going above. This will become a gluteal fascia. We all say there is no true internervous plane because this is gluteus maximus muscle, which is the bulky muscle here. We can split these fibers. Okay, what we have read there, yes, you can't split more than 7 centimeters from the tip of the greater trochanter because it will damage the inferior gluteal artery and nerve. Okay, then don't give an incision over the greater trochanter. Any bony prominences, incision, scar, it will be painful. Okay, retract the gluteus maximus. Beautifully, you can see this is the splitting of gluteus maximus, and you will see the underlying fat over the short external rotators. This is the common question asked in orals. Wherever you will see fat, there will be an important neurovascular structures. Okay, you can retract the gluteus maximus to reveal the fatty layer over the short external rotators. You can see these are the short external rotators. This is the vastus lateralis. This is the this is the abductors, gluteus medius. So after retraction, fat pad, usually we say that you can do with the mop, you can displace the fat pad and you can see these short external rotators, and you will put the retractors, Charnley retractor, everyone know that Charnley retractors. Then you will see the underlying short external rotators. You will cut near to the insertion. You need to leave a cuff of tissue for resuturing. So this is regarding this. See the relation, this is very important. Piriformis below, other external rotator above, okay, to the sciatic nerve. Then this is, you can see they are releasing near the insertion. Okay. Then after this, you will see the joint capsule incised in inverted T fashion. They will say here also they will ask, because they are assisted and you know that how to cut a capsule. So they will say that horizontal limb and the vertical limb. Horizontal limb is towards the head of the femur. This is towards the neck. Vertical limb. Okay. This is the T, or they will say inverted T from the posterior approach. Okay. We expose the femoral head and neck. So to gain additional exposure, you can cut quadratus femoris, because yes, you are doing arthroplasty. You can cut, you can sacrifice that MCFA because you are going to remove the head. Okay. And you can also release some fibers of gluteus maximus to get a extensor approach. What are the advantages? Relative stability of the operated hip. Yes, I will say relative stability. brief period of immobilization. You need to keep an abduction pillow in post-operate to prevent the posterior dislocation. Okay, rapidity with which joints may be opened, post though relatively bloodless plane. Yes, excellent exposure to the posterior lip and posterior column of the acetabulum. Disadvantage, dependent incision, more prone for edema and pressure source if the patient is not mobilized. Acetabular exposure is inferior in this approach. Increased post-operative infection because because soiling is common and the site of incision is very near to the perianal regions. Weakening of the posterior capsule, I already told that posterior capsule is weak. You will have a vascular damage if you are going to damage the quadratus femoris in hip preserving surgeries. Only limited exposure of sciatic nerve. There is no possibility. There is possibility of sciatic nerve injury. Yes, because of you will have a sometimes retraction palsy is also there. Sometimes you will have a cut injury without knowing the anatomy. If you're going to dissect, you must know the relation of short external rotators and sciatic nerve. This is very important. At last, there are two things to tell about medial approach. You all know the Ludloff approach. Indications are used in DDH. Normally nowadays we are called as DDH. Congenital dislocation of hip is not at all used. Okay, this is originally described as posteromedial. In 1939, it is modified to a present anteromedial approach. Other indications are biopsy, psoas release, operator neurectomy. These are the things you will do with Ludloff's approach. Disadvantage, this incision is closer to perineum, limited exposure to the capsule. If you're going for a deep incision, it will lead to vascular injury. So this is the position, flexion, abduction, and external rotation, supine position. You can see these are the bony landmark, how it looks because of external rotation. Yes, there is a prominence of lesser trochanter. So you can see here, this is regarding the muscular planes anatomy. This is the medial side muscles. You will see that this the superficial plane is between the adductor longus and gracilis. Okay, the plane superficial dissection is between the adductor longus and gracilis. I have marked already. This is adductor longus and this is gracilis. Okay, superficial dissections between adductor longus and gracilis. Continue the deep dissection, okay, which is between adductor brevis and magnus. Okay, you need to feel the lesser trochanter. Develop a plane between. You all know, I already told superficial plane is between the adductor longus and gracilis. Deep plane is between the adductor magnus and adductor brevis. Okay. So this is the incision or the medial approach, that is over the adductor longus tendon. The internervous plane, I already told that in superficial plane, the both adductor longus and gracilis are innervated by anterior division of operator nerve. In deep plane, you will see adductor brevis is supplied by anterior division. Adductor magnus, you will have two. Adductor portion is from the posterior division of operator nerve and ischial portion is by the tibial portion of the sciatic nerve. Okay. There is an internervous plane in deep. So this is regarding gracilis, adductor longus superficial plane. This is the plane, how they are developing with the fingers. And you can see this is the adductor magnus muscle, retract the adductor longus and gracilis to brevis with overlying anterior division of the operator nerve. These are all the anterior division of the operator nerve. Here you can retract the adductor brevis muscle from the magnus to uncover the posterior division of the operators. Okay. Note that lesser trochanter. You can see this is the lesser trochanter, which is deep. Here the danger points already we know that anterior branch of operator nerve, posterior division lies in substance of operator externus, and the third danger is MC, medial circumflex artery. Okay, this is towards passes on the distal aspect of the psoas tendon. Thank you. This is regarding surgical approach. Yeah, I know this is a vast lecture, but it is an important topic. Definitely you will get a question. I think here I will stop screen sharing. Is it okay? My screen is closed. Hello? Shinam, are you there? Yeah. Hi.
You are sharing the screen.
Now I am sharing the screen. I think I
Yes.
have stopped shared.
Yes.
Yeah. I yes, it's started.
Okay. Hello everyone. This is Dr. Sheenam Bansal. So today we will do the important topics. Firstly, there is articular cartilage. Articular cartilage has 4 parts, 4 layers. Firstly is the superficial, then is the intermediate zone, then we have deep layer, then we have the tight mark. Okay, firstly we have superficial, then we have intermediate, then we have deep, then we have tight mark, and then we have subchondral bone. When we go from the above downwards, collagen will decrease and peptidoglycan will increase, and your chondrocytes in the first layer are horizontal. Then when you go deep, they will become firstly oblique and then they will become the vertical. So in the first layer, we have more collagen and less peptidoglycan. And as we go deep, the chondrocytes will become vertical. In the first layer, we have horizontal presentation of the this chondrocytes. So after the articular cartilage, our second topic is the okay. Our second topic is the coxa vara. So in the coxa vara, you have to learn if there is neck shaft angle. If neck shaft angle is less than 120 degree, then it will be called as coxa vara. So what is this angle? This is neck, this is head, this is shaft. If neck shaft angle is less than 120 degree. So what happens in coxa vara? The inferior portion of this inferior portion doesn't grow, and so it there becomes the deformity that is called coxa vara. There is a segment called Fairbanks triangle. You can see it in the on the X-ray. Normally, HE angle is less than 25 degrees. If we have HE angle of, this is a normal. If we have HE angle of less than 45 degree, then we only do observation of the patient. If it is more than 45 degree but less than 60 degree, then we will keep watching patient. If it progresses, then we will do surgery. If it is more than 60 degree HE angle, then we have to do the surgery. Which surgery? Valgus derotation osteotomy. So next topic is the brachial plexus. Firstly, in the brachial plexus, you need to remember this. You can have Erb's palsy, you can have extended Erb's palsy, and you can have the whole brachial plexus involved without Horner syndrome, and whole brachial plexus with Horner syndrome. Okay, so this is the Erb's palsy. In the Erb's palsy, C5, C6 is involved. In the extended, C5, C6, C7 is involved. And Third is the without Horner syndrome. Fourth is the with Horner syndrome. This classification is also called as Naraka's classification. And then we also have Erb's palsy and Klumpke's palsy. Okay, in the Klumpke's palsy, there is involvement of CAP1. In the Erb's palsy, there is involvement of C5, C6. In the Erb's palsy, we have policeman or waiter's tip deformity. And in the Klumpke's, we have deformity that is beggar's hand. Okay, so in the policeman, it means Erb's palsy. In the Erb's palsy, policeman tip deformity is seen, or waiter's tip deformity is seen. There is pronation, there is elbow, there is wrist flexion and elbow extension and adduction. And in the Klumpke's, we have the ulnar involvement as CAP1 is involved. So in it, we have the wrist beggar's tip, beggar's hand deformity. That is, we have wrist extension and we have flexion at the PIP and DIP and hyperextension at the metacarpophalangeal joints. So my next topic is DDH. Okay, in DDH, what happens? You know, in DDH, we have the USG classification, that is graph classification. Then we have the on the X-ray based classification, that is Tönnies classification. Okay, for the Tönnies classification, what happens? This is a Perkins line. This is the line passing from the supraacetabular area. So if head is medial to the Perkins line and below this line, then it will be stage 1. If here, then it will be stage 2, means lateral to Perkins line but below supraacetabular area. But if it is here, that is touching the supraacetabular area line and lateral to the Perkins line, that is type 3, and type 4 is above the supraacetabular line and lateral to the Perkins line. Okay, so in the DDH, patient will come to you complaining of gait limp with when the child starts walking. So patient will have waddling gait if bilateral involvement is there. Okay, and so next topic is the bone components. I want to complete maximum topics in less time, so I will finish with speed. In the bone components, we have organic components and inorganic components. You can remember it as inorganic is a longer word than organic, so it will have 60% composition, means 60% of the part, 60% part is made by the inorganic component and 40% by the organic. Inorganic is a longer word, so it will have hydroxyapatite. Hydroxyapatite is a longer word. In the organic component, we have collagen 1 peptidoglycan, and we also have bone cells. Bone cells like we have osteoclast, we have osteoblast, and we have the osteocytes. Okay. Now, firstly, osteoclasts are formed by the hematopoietic cells. So hematopoietic cells, which hematopoietic cells? Those are the monocytes, and osteoblasts are formed by the mesenchymal cells. Okay, mesenchymal cells, and osteocytes are formed by the osteoblast itself. Okay, osteocytes are maximum, that is 90%. So now we have osteoclast and osteoblast. Okay, osteoclast has on their surface two type of receptors, one for the calcitonin and second for the rank ligand. So osteoblasts have many receptors, that is the main difference. And osteoblast, we have done that osteoblasts are formed from the mesenchymal cells. Mesenchymal cells form osteoblast. Who helps? BMP, run next to, and WNT. Osteoblast release what? Rank ligand and osteoprotein. Okay, osteoprotein. And now we have our next topic is the Maid-Lung deformity. Maid-Lung deformity. So in the Maid-Lung deformity, what happens? Only dorsal and lateral portion of radius is growing. Okay. So if only dorsal and lateral portion is growing, what happens? Volar tilt will increase, inclination will increase. Okay. If means if it is radius, dorsal and lateral portion is growing, and medial and volar portion is not growing, what happens? It becomes like that. So your lunate bone will come here. Okay, lunate bone will come here. So we will see the what will the result of that. There will be ulnar impingement, and there will be V-shaped deformity, and there is Vickers ligament. Normally Vickers ligament is attached to apophysis normally, but in Maitland deformity it will be attached to metaphysis. So what will we do? We will do in the Maitland deformity three procedures we can do. First is we can do DOM osteotomy, we can do direct procedure, and we can do soft Kappanchi procedure. So next topic is the Dupuytren's contracture. In the Dupuytren's contracture, what happens? There is change of the collagen 1 to collagen 3. Okay. So there will be tabletop deformity. What is the tabletop deformity? There will be tabletop deformity. If you see tabletop deformity in the patients with Dupuytren's disease, you will do surgical treatment. So there is the tabletop deformity. This is a MCP joint. Okay, this is a MCP joint. There can be flexion of 30 degree. If there is 30 degree flexion and at TIP there is 20 degree flexion or table deformity is there, then you can do the surgery. So you have options of collagenase injections. You have options of fasciectomy, either partial or full. Okay, whenever you are giving injections, you can injure the flexor tendons. So to avoid the injury to flexor tendons, you have to move the fingers. Next topic is the genu vera. So we can have either genu vera and we can have the Blount's disease. Firstly, in the genu verum, what happens? In the genu verum, there is increase of intercondylar distance. Okay, there is increase of intercondylar distance. So it can be seen in rickets, it can be seen in Blount's disease, as I have said earlier. So there will be more growth at the lateral side and less at the medial side. So what will you do? You will do epiphysiodesis on the lateral side, either with the help of plate or with the help of staples. So we have the options of staples, we have the option of plates. Plate is a figure of 8 plate. Staples, the risk of using staples is there can be growth arrest. Okay, so we can use the plate. While using plate, you should keep the plate in the center. Otherwise, there will be more deformity occurs. There will be there can be deformity of sagittal deformity can occur if you are not keeping it in the center. Then we have the Blount's disease. In the Blount's disease, what happens? There will be posteromedial decaying. There will be lateral subluxation of tibia. Okay, so in the Blount's disease, you can do the same treatments, and there is you can do epiphysiodesis, you can do staples, etc. Then we have genu valgum. In the genu valgum, there will be increase of intermalleolar distance. There will be increase of intermalleolar distance, and in the same thing, if there is a restriction of the growth at lateral side and more growth is at the medial side, so you will do epiphysiodesis or staples or plates on the medial side. Then we have the Charcot's disease. In the Charcot's disease, Charcot's joint, this is firstly, it is painless. Then it can be due to leprosy, diabetes, alcohol, etc., syringomyelia. In the Charcot's joint, you have 3 classifications. That is broad sky. First is a broad sky. In the broad sky, there are 5 types. Firstly, there is involvement of tarso-metatarsal joint. Then we have intertarsal joint. Then we have tibio-talar joint, and then there is involvement of forefoot. Okay. Then we have second classification, that is Eckernholz. In the Eckernholz classification, what happens in the first stage, there will be edema. So edema can also be seen in the cellulitis. So how will you differentiate it? You can differentiate it with the help of scan. So in the technetium scan will be positive in both, that is Charcot's and cellulitis. But indium scan will be negative in Charcot joint arthropathy. Second stage is firstly is edema, then there can be remodeling, there can be ankylosis, that is fibrous ankylosis. So it will progress likewise. Then we have the cavus. So cavus can be of 2 types. Firstly is a forefoot varus cavus. Then we have the posterior, means hindfoot cavus. Okay. So hindfoot cavus, posterior cavus, anterior cavus. Posterior T means polio. So polio, in the polio, you will see the posterior cavus. Okay, this is a static disease. In the anterior cavus, that is, you will see in the Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease. In the Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease, there will be peroneus brevis muscle involvement. There will be intrinsic muscle involvement, and there will be tibialis anterior involvement, and this is progressive. Okay, then we have, how will you treat it? I have already told you there is a tibialis anterior involved, there is a peroneus brevis involved. If tibialis anterior is involved, just shift the tibialis posterior to tibialis anterior, shift the peroneus longus to peroneus brevis. That's it. And in the next question is, next is a flat foot. So flat foot can be seen in, firstly we have flexible flat foot, we have the rigid. How will you differentiate if it is flexible or if it is rigid? In the flexible flat foot, what happens? You will do the jack test and you will make the patient stand on the toes. If then it gets corrected, then it is flexible, otherwise rigid. Then the reasons of flat foot may be coalitions. Okay, coalitions are of two types: the talocalcaneal and talonavicular. In the talonavicular, you will see at the 12 to 16 years, you will see ant-eater sign, and in the talonavicular, you will see at 8 to 12 years, you will see C sign, you will see breakage of cyma line. Okay, so in the talocalcaneal, if there is less than 50% involvement, then you can use the FHL. You can use FHL and keep it in between. Okay. In this, if there is less than 50% involvement, you can use extensor digit or a brevis muscle. You can also use hypocure to play in between. So in the talocalcaneal, you will use medial incision. In the talonavicular, you will use lateral incision. So flat foot can also be due to your tibialis posterior muscle and your spring ligament. Okay, tibialis posterior dysfunction. So how will you spring ligament? So how will you detect if it is due to tibialis posterior or due to spring ligament? You will do the push test, push heel test, and the tibialis posterior, you will see if there is, if patient is not able to stand on the toes, then there is tibialis posterior involvement. Okay, so next is we have next topic is the hallux valgus osteotomies. Okay, firstly, see, in the hallux valgus we have two angles to see. Firstly, in the intermetatarsal angle, second is the hallux valgus angle. So I have remembered it like this: make metatarsal, make phalanx. Okay, so if you have to do phalanx procedure, that is Akin procedure, we will go from up to downward. Akin procedure, then we have chevron osteotomy, then we have scarf osteotomy, then we have lapidus procedure. Okay, now in the Akin procedure, there is, what do? We will use the distal, we will use a proximal phalanx. Okay, this is proximal phalanx osteotomy is done. In the chevron osteotomy, it is done at the level of the distal metatarsal. Okay, scarf osteotomy is shaft osteotomy as for S, and lapidus procedure is fusion of the this joint, tarso metatarsal joint. So we have done 4 procedures here: Akin procedure, chevron, scarf, and lapidus procedure. Now, if intermetatarsal angle is less than 15 degree, then you will do chevron osteotomy. If it is more than 15 degree intermetatarsal angle and hallux valgus angle is less than 45, then you will do scarf osteotomy. If more than 15 intermetatarsal angle and more than 45 is hallux valgus angle, then you will do the lapidus process. So I will finish my topics here. Thank you so much for watching this video.
Yeah, thank you guys. This was a great thing. I think it will be useful for you all. Shinam,
Have
we
you
can
stopped the
stop
recording?
here. Yeah, I need to stop.
Okay. How was it?